I can't imagine any place I would rather be right now than on an island dotted with beautiful turquoise beaches and surrounded by a coral reef, in a room filled with people who are deeply connected to the ocean. Some of you, like me, I suspect, like to dive and snorkel, and others like to fish, and even more of us like seafood. How many memories do we all share of being at the beach in the afternoon with our family and friends, taking our kids swimming? How many glasses of wine have we enjoyed watching the sunset? Not enough. So I don't think it's a stretch to say that part of our relationship with the ocean is defined by love. And not just us. Every year, about 500,000 people come to Curacao to relax by the water. And not just here. All over the world, half of all vacations taken are to the coast. The ocean also provides us with food and jobs. Curaçao's coral reef generates about $450 million for the island's people. All those tourists rent hotel rooms, cars, go out to eat, tour the island, dive, snorkel. Money just slips through their fingers. And not just here. Everywhere there's a shore, and in between, the ocean gives stuff away for free. Hundreds of millions of people are employed, mostly in poorer countries, catching, processing, transporting, and selling fish. 16% of all the animal protein that people eat comes from seafood. But of course, like any relationship, our relationship with the ocean is complicated. And there are problems. And these problems usually arise when one partner doesn't hold up his end of the relationship. So I'm here tonight to give some relationship advice. It's my contention that we need to base our relationship with the ocean on the same values we strive to uphold in our personal relationships: love, respect, knowledge, and restraint. Because just like some marriages fail because one partner gives and the other just takes, so too will our relationship with the ocean. So this is how we take from the ocean. Scientists believe that if we don't change our ways, in 30 years, we're going to run out of fish. About the time my college-age kids graduate, about the time my college-age kids are my age. And understanding how it's possible to overfish something as big as the ocean is a hard thing to wrap your mind around. And that's because when we think of fishing, most people think that this is fishing, that this is how seafood gets to our plates. But it's not. Most fish that we eat is caught by industrial fishing companies that employ about 4 different ways of catching fish. And you have to see it to believe it. So does anybody out here like shrimp? So this is the main way that shrimp are caught, and it's using a giant bag-shaped net called a trawl. And trawls get dragged over the bottom, and the front of them is weighted. And a problem with trawls is that they tear up everything on the bottom. They tear up corals and sponges, and they knock over rocks, and they transform the complex habitat that is the bottom of our oceans, and they turn it into just dust and sand. And trawls also scoop up everything in their path. So here is a catch from a shrimp trawl. For every 1 kilo of shrimp that gets caught, 10 kilos of other creatures are killed. So fishermen dump all that's caught on the deck, and then they go through it, and they pick out the shrimp, and they put it in the baskets. And then they shovel everything else over the side of the boat, dead. The second way that we catch fish is on the right of this picture, and it's called a long line. And a long line is just that, a long, strong line strung between floats. And from those lines are strung many shorter lines, each one with a hook on it. These lines can be up to 50 kilometers long, and a boat might fish dozens of them at a time. The problem with long lines is, like trawls, anything with a mouth big enough to bite a hook about as big as your fist does. And so every year, tens of thousands of sea turtles are killed on long lines. 64 species of seabirds are also caught and killed on long lines. 23 species of seabirds are endangered. This is an albatross that grabbed a long line as it was let out off the back of a boat fishing for tuna. And as the line went out, it pulls the bird underwater where it drowns. Millions and millions of creatures die this way. Whales, dolphins, sharks, sea turtles. The third way we catch fish is up on the left side of this, and it's with a gill net or a drift net. This is also an enormous, enormous wall of netting. It can be tens of kilometers long. And drift nets work by tangling up anything that swims into them. This is an ocean sunfish. We don't eat those. This is a gray whale, sharks, lots of things. Millions of creatures every year die in drift nets. The last way I want to describe that we catch fish is with a purse seine. And purse seines they encircle schools of fish with enormous nets. And so I put this picture in the presentation so you can see the booms that hold up this net and the men who work on this. This is a tuna fishing boat at the bottom. And purse seines work like this. A helicopter from the boat spots a school of fish, and the boat gives chase. And when it catches up, a speedboat drags the purse seine around the school of fish. And the net from a purse seine can be 2 kilometers long. As the net sinks, the purse seine pulls it into a bowl and then pulls it on board. And this is the catch from a purse seine. These are skipjack tuna. You might know them as chunk light when they come in a can. The problem here is you might not notice it at first, but the two fishermen in the middle are holding a manta ray. And the fisherman farthest to the left, right by his feet, is a leatherback sea turtle. And that's the oldest, rarest, most endangered sea turtle in our oceans. So why don't we know about this? Every set of a net earns a company hundreds of thousands of dollars. And they don't want us to know because they want us to keep eating tuna fish. So the industry has a name for this, and it's all this waste, and it's called bycatch. And 1/4 to 1/3 of all creatures caught in commercial fishing nets and on long lines is thrown back into the ocean dead. So imagine every time you went to the grocery store and paid for your groceries, then discarding 1/3 of them. There's a tremendous amount of waste here. 25 billion kilos a year of waste. Now, big numbers like that are hard for me to wrap my mind around, so let me give you a comparison. 25 billion kilos is the equivalent of about 400 million people. The population of the United States, Canada, Holland, Luxembourg combined. Here's another comparison. The Twin Towers in New York. When they fell, the New York Times reported that the debris from the towers weighed 1,650,000,000 kilos. How much more bycatch is there every year? Well, 15.6 times more bycatch. So imagine piling up stacking 31 towers on top of one another. Imagine 31 towers of dead sea creatures. It would stretch into the stratosphere, 13 kilometers. So I think that we have a darker side to our relationship with the sea, and it's defined by these values. I don't think that any of us believe that we can create enduring relationships based on these values. So we don't see industrial fishing boats around Curacao, so Curacao has been spared overfishing. Sadly, no, it hasn't. So I'm going to show you some family photos from a charter boat fisherman to show you what has also happened here on Curacao. So this guy's name, he's got the hat on there, is Tommy Loans, and he also fished in the Caribbean out of Key West. And this picture, as we go through these series of pictures and we move forward in time, I want you to notice what happens to the size of fish. I want you to notice what happens to the numbers of species of fish that are caught. So these are Goliath grouper, these giant fish. They used to live here on Curacao and in Bonaire, but no more. So fast forward 10 years, and Tommy's got some gray in his beard. He's got a new boat, and he's still catching some Goliath groupers, but they're a lot smaller than they were 10 years before. And he's catching other smaller fish as well. Come forward again 10 years, and there's no Goliath grouper. There's a lot of smaller reef fish. And then we move forward in time again, and most fish are about as big as your hand. And Curaçao's fishermen have done the same thing to our reefs here. When you dive today, it's rare to see fish bigger than your hand. So overfishing affects not only fish, it also affects the coral reef itself. See, on a healthy reef, algae and coral compete with one another, but we don't see the algae because reef fish keep it clipped as short as a golf course green. Today, when you dive on Curacao, you see a lot of algae-covered coral like this. Here's a Caribbean reef from the 1970s. You'll see elkhorn coral, staghorn coral, and other species. Here is a reef today in the Caribbean. There's still some live coral there, but there's a lot of algae. In the last 4 decades, Curaçao's reefs have lost 50% of their coral. So how do we get here? How do we get to this place? We need to stop believing the sea is limitless. We need to stop believing the fiction we need to stop romanticizing fishermen and the fishing business. We have to stop believing that we have a right to eat any and all fish. We have to stop acting like the oceans belong solely to the adults alive today. In reality, we're stealing the ocean's life from our children. We got to stop buying fish, or buy a lot less fish. And this is the most important thing. Here for Curacao and all over the world, we need to, second most important thing, we got to start teaching about the value of oceans in schools. And then the most important thing is we need to create large, permanent, no-fishing areas. These are called marine protected areas. Only by protecting the places where fish spawn will we allow populations to rebuild themselves. And this is going to benefit people who work in the tourism industry, and it's going to benefit fishermen. As fish populations rebuild themselves, they'll spill out. They'll spill out of the protected areas, and fishermen will be able to catch them again. And this is where you come in. It's really important that you speak to politicians and convince them that it is vitally important that we create marine protected areas here on Curacao to protect our ocean's resources. Thank you.